Hopkins County, Texas, summer 1945. The screen door of the county jail creaked in the heat. Sheriff Tom Harlow stood at the threshold, watching a German woman sweep the courthouse steps in the copper light of late afternoon. Her name was Greta Muller, captured in North Africa, prisoner of war, enemy of the state. He had been a lawman for 12 years, steady, unshakable, married to duty. But when Army intelligence received an anonymous letter 3 months later, they uncovered something that would shake the entire POW program to its foundation. The sheriff had fallen in love with the enemy, and she with him. Before we dive deeper into this incredible true story, if you're enjoying this kind of forgotten history brought to life, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another tale from the past. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. Now let's get back to 1945, because what happened next would force Tom Harlow to choose between everything he'd ever known and a love that defied every rule of war. Tom stood there that evening watching Greta fold the broom against the wall, and something shifted in his chest. A recognition. A danger. He turned away from the window. But it was already too late. In that moment, though he didn't yet know it, Tom Harlow had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The war was ending, but for him, a different kind of battle was just beginning. Hopkins County sprawled across northeast Texas like a faded quilt. 15,000 souls, cotton fields, cattle ranches, red dirt roads that turned to rivers when it rained. The county seat sat 30 miles from Camp Fannin, where thousands of German prisoners lived behind barbed wire and watchtowers. By 1945, the POW program had evolved beyond anyone's imagination. With American men overseas, labor was scarce. The military began contracting prisoners to local farms, factories, even small-town work details. They picked cotton, harvested timber, repaired roads, always under guard, always watched. That spring, the Army expanded the program to include women. There weren't many, perhaps 200 across all of Texas. Most had been captured in North Africa serving as nurses, radio operators, clerks attached to Rommel's Africa Corps. Hopkins County had neither hospital nor laundry large enough to warrant the paperwork. What it had was a courthouse that needed cleaning, a jail that needed cooking, and a sheriff known for fairness who agreed to supervise 2 women prisoners 3 days a week. Greta arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. 2 MPs brought her in a jeep, handed Tom the paperwork, left. She stood in the doorway of his office, blinking in the sudden shade. 28 years old, slender, dark blonde hair pulled back in a regulation knot. She wore the standard POW uniform, blue denim work dress with PW stenciled in white across the back. Her eyes were gray-green, the color of sage after rain. "You speak English?" Tom asked. "Yes," she said. Her accent was thick but clear. "I learned in school before." He explained the work. Kitchen duty, 3 days a week. Any trouble, any attempt to leave, and she'd go straight back to Fannin. She met his eyes when she spoke. Most prisoners looked at the floor, not Greta. There was something in her gaze that wasn't defiance, but it wasn't submission either. Recognition, perhaps. One human being seeing another. Tom looked away first. The work was simple. Mrs. Patterson, the courthouse cook, was 67 and grateful for help. Greta learned the routines quickly. Coffee at 7, lunch at noon. She moved with precision, the way nurses move, efficient, careful. She didn't speak unless spoken to. Tom watched her at first the way a lawman watches anyone in his custody. But he couldn't help noticing other things. The way she hummed quietly while washing dishes. The way she flinched at sudden noises. The way she paused sometimes, staring out the kitchen window at the endless Texas sky, and something in her face looked like drowning. 4 weeks passed. One afternoon in May, Tom brought paperwork to the kitchen and found Greta standing at the window. She didn't hear him enter. Her reflection in the glass showed tears running silent down her face. He cleared his throat. She spun, wiping her eyes quickly. "I am sorry," she said. "I was remembering." Tom should have left. Instead, he heard himself ask, "Remembering what?" She hesitated, then quietly, "My brother. He would be 19 now. He was conscripted in 43, infantry, Russia. I have not heard from him in 18 months. The Ostfront, the Eastern Front. Even in Texas, people knew what that meant. Frozen mud, endless dying." "I'm sorry," Tom said, and meant it. Greta looked at him with surprise. "You are the first American who has said that to me." "War makes orphans of us all," Tom said, one way or another. Something shifted in the air between them, small as a breath, but real. That evening, Tom sat on his porch as the sun descended. He tried to read the newspaper but found himself thinking about a German woman crying in his courthouse kitchen, about a brother lost in snow and smoke, about the way grief looked the same in any language. Summer arrived like a hammer. The temperature climbed past 100 and stayed there. The courthouse kitchen became an oven. Mrs. Patterson went home early most days, unable to bear the heat, leaving Greta and Tom as the only souls in the building after 3 o'clock. He found reasons to stay. Paperwork, he told himself. But the truth was simpler. He wanted to hear her voice. They began talking. She told him about growing up in Bremen, a port city on the North Sea, about working at the hospital when the war started. He told her about his father teaching him to track deer, about the loneliness of being the man everyone trusted, but no one truly knew. She laughed once, surprised by something he said about a rooster that terrorized the previous sheriff. The sound was bright and sudden, like water in the desert. "You have never married?" Greta asked one afternoon. "Never found the time," Tom said, which was the lie he always told. The truth was harder. He had loved once. A school teacher named Sarah who left for Dallas and never looked back. After that, Tom poured himself into the badge. "And you?" he asked. "I was engaged," Greta said quietly. "A medical student. He was killed in France in 40. The weeks folded into each other, heat and routine and something else growing beneath the surface. Tom brought her books from his house. She taught him German phrases. They discussed philosophy, religion, the future. One evening in July, Tom handed her a folded piece of paper. "What is this?" she asked. "A letter I wrote to the Red Cross," Tom said, "inquiring about your brother. It's a long shot, but—" Greta stared at the paper in her hand. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. "Why would you do this?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you," Tom thought. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a prisoner. Because it's the right thing to do," he said instead. 3 weeks later, the Red Cross responded. Tom walked to the kitchen where Greta was peeling potatoes. He handed her the paper without speaking. She read. Her hands began to shake. "He is alive," she whispered. "In a Soviet camp. Alive." She looked up at Tom, and in her eyes he saw something that made his heart break and sing simultaneously. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. Tom turned to leave, to put distance between them. Tom, his first name. She had never used it before. He stopped. "I need you to know," Greta said, her voice steady now, "that you have given me back hope, not just about my brother, about everything." Tom stood with his back to her, his throat tight. "Greta, I know we cannot," she said softly, "but I wanted you to know." Tom turned and looked at this woman who had somehow become the fixed point around which his days revolved. "I know," he said. "God, help me. I know." That evening, Tom understood with perfect clarity that he was in love with Greta Müller, German prisoner of war, enemy of his country, and that there was no path forward that didn't end in ruin. He loved her anyway. August burned across Texas. The war in Europe had ended in May, but the Pacific Theater raged on. In the courthouse kitchen, Tom and Greta existed in a careful bubble of propriety and longing. They didn't touch. They didn't speak of what hung between them, but anyone with eyes could have seen it. Mrs. Patterson noticed. One afternoon she pulled Tom aside. "You be careful, Tom. she said quietly. People talk. Tom understood. Hopkins County was patriotic to its bones. 347 men from the county were serving overseas. 22 had died. The idea of a lawman fraternizing with a German prisoner would be seen as betrayal. "I haven't done anything wrong," Tom said. "Not yet," Mrs. Patterson said. "But that way lies nothing but pain." In September, the war ended. Japan surrendered. The world erupted in celebration, but for the POWs, uncertainty loomed. Repatriation to Germany. But when? And to what? Their country was rubble. Greta said nothing about the future, but Tom saw the fear in her eyes. Bremen was in the British zone. Everything she knew had likely been destroyed. Her brother was in Soviet hands. She had no family left, no home to return to. "What will you do?" Tom asked one evening. "I do not know," Greta said. "Wait for orders. Hope." "I listen," Tom said quietly. Greta turned to him. "What are you saying?" Tom had not planned this, but the words came anyway. "Marry me. Stay here, in Texas, with me." The silence was absolute. "You cannot mean this," Greta whispered. "I've never meant anything more in my life. Tom, I am a prisoner, an enemy. They will not allow it. You will lose everything." "I've already lost everything that matters," Tom said. "If you go back to Germany, I will spend the rest of my life as half a person." He stepped closer. "I love you, Greta." Tears spilled down her face. "I love you too. I have tried not to. But I love you, Tom Harlow." "Then don't stop," Tom said. "Let me find a way." Greta reached up and touched his face. "Will you marry me?" Tom asked. "If I can find a way, will you say yes?" "Yes," Greta whispered. "Yes." The next morning, Tom began making calls. He started with the camp commander at Fannin, Colonel Morrison. Morrison listened and was silent. "Sheriff," he finally said, "are you out of your mind?" "Probably," Tom admitted. "The regulations are Byzantine. You'd need approval from Washington, background checks, investigations." "Is it possible?" "There have been cases, not many, but a few. If everything is done properly, if there's no impropriety, and if the prisoner has a clean record," Morrison exhaled. "It's a long shot, Tom." "I'll take those odds," Tom said. Over 6 weeks, Tom navigated military bureaucracy. He filed forms, submitted to interviews. Investigators combed through his entire life. They questioned everyone. They reviewed Greta's record, her capture, her service, her conduct. They interviewed her repeatedly. Through it all, Tom and Greta maintained strict professional distance when others were present. In October, an anonymous letter arrived at Army intelligence in San Antonio. It claimed Sheriff Harlow had been engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a German POW. That security had been compromised. The investigation intensified. 2 officers arrived in Hopkins County unannounced. Tom stood in his office while they interrogated him. "Have you at any time been intimate with prisoner Miller?" "No." "Have you given her special treatment?" "I wrote a letter to the Red Cross about her brother, that's all." "You've requested permission to marry her. That suggests a relationship beyond proper boundaries." "I love her," Tom said simply. "That's not a crime. And I've done nothing improper. Check every record. You'll find I've followed every regulation. Love is not the issue. The optics are. The American public will not understand." "Then they'll have to try," Tom said. "I'm not breaking any laws." The investigation dragged through November. Tom barely slept. The story leaked to papers. The reaction was divided. Some outraged, others sympathetic. The county commissioners called an emergency meeting. Tom stood before them. "We fought a war to defend freedom," he said, "including the freedom to love who we choose. Greta Muller is not our enemy. She never was." The vote was close, but they allowed him to remain sheriff pending the Army's decision. In December, the answer came. Tom held the letter in his hands, afraid to open it. He opened it slowly. Permission granted. Tom read it 3 times. Permission granted. subject to conditions. But yes, they could marry. Tom sat at his desk and put his face in his hands. He cried, relief and joy overwhelming him. An hour later, he drove to Camp Fannin. Colonel Morrison met him at the gate. "You lucky son of a gun," Morrison said, smiling. "I'll have her brought out." Greta walked across the compound. When she saw Tom, she stopped. Tom held up the letter. They said yes. Greta stared. Then she broke into a run. She crashed into his arms, sobbing, laughing. "We can marry?" she asked. "We can marry." They married 3 weeks later, January 5th, 1946. The ceremony was small. Lutheran church. Colonel Morrison attended, Mrs. Patterson, 2 deputies, a handful of townspeople. Greta wore a simple gray dress. Tom wore his dress uniform. They spoke vows that bridged nations and history. When the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Tom kissed her. Their first kiss. It tasted like tears and hope. The first year was difficult. Greta faced suspicion, cold shoulders, hostility. Tom stood beside her through it. Slowly, the town began to accept her. Greta learned to cook Texas food. She joined the Church Ladies' Auxiliary. She volunteered at the hospital. She taught Tom to dance in their living room. In April 1946, she received word her brother had been released from Soviet captivity. He was alive. He wrote, "I am glad you found safety and love. It gives me hope." Greta cried. Tom held her. "We'll bring him here," Tom said. They had 3 children, Sarah, Robert, James. The children grew up understanding that love could cross any border, that humanity was stronger than hate. Years passed. Tom served as sheriff until 1962. Greta became a fixture in Hopkins County, known for her kindness, her work with immigrants. She helped them navigate the bureaucracies she had survived. In 1978, the Historical Society interviewed them. The interviewer asked if Greta had regrets. "I regret the war," she said. "Every death, every cruelty, but I do not regret this." She took Tom's hand. "This I would choose again 1,000 times." Tom nodded. People think love stories have to be easy to be real, but the ones that matter are the ones you fight for. The interviewer asked what they wanted people to remember. Greta spoke. "Remember that enemies are made, not born. Remember that we are all human beings seeking the same things: safety, love, hope. Remember that the bravest thing you can do is choose compassion when the world tells you to choose hate." Tom added, "Remember that love doesn't care about borders or wars. It finds a way. If you let it, it always finds a way." Tom Harlow died in 1989 at 85. Greta held his hand as he passed. She outlived him by 6 years. Passing in 1995, she was 78. On her bedside table was the letter Tom had written to the Red Cross. She had kept it all those years. Evidence of the moment everything changed. They are buried together in the Lutheran cemetery, under a stone that reads, "Thomas Harlow, 1904-1989. Greta Miller Harlow, 1917-1995. Love knows no borders." Their story was forgotten for decades, buried beneath courthouse ledgers and fading war records. The people of Hopkins County went on with their lives. The world moved into the atomic age, and the memory of the sheriff who once defied the rules for love slipped quietly into history. But love, as it often does, finds its way back into the light. In 2003, more than half a century after Tom and Greta's improbable union, their granddaughter, Anna Harlow Bennett, discovered a small wooden box in her grandmother's cedar chest. Inside were yellowed letters, Tom's badge, and the fragile Red Cross reply that had changed everything in 1945. Tucked beneath those mementos was a diary, Greta's diary, written in careful German script and later translated by Anna herself. It was filled with longing, doubt, and extraordinary courage. From those pages came The Enemy I Married, Love and Redemption in West Texas. a memoir that would reignite public fascination with one of the most unlikely love stories of the Second World War. The book climbed regional bestseller lists and soon drew the attention of historians, journalists, and readers across the country. University archives began revisiting the history of German POWs in the American South. Documentaries explored the forgotten camps scattered through Texas farmland. But none captured the intimacy of Greta's words. The way she described the first time Tom smiled, the terror of waiting for permission to marry, or the astonishment of being accepted at last by a town that had once called her the enemy. Today, a bronze historical marker stands outside the Hopkins County Courthouse, just a few yards from where Greta once swept the steps in the heat of that long Texas summer. Tourists stopped to read it, tracing the engraved names: Thomas Harlow, Sheriff of Hopkins County, and Greta Muller Harlow, former POW. The inscription tells the story in plain, factual sentences, but no marker can hold the full truth. The loneliness that drew them together, the risk they took, or the quiet faith that love could outlast suspicion and war. At the bottom of the plaque, a single question is etched. In a world divided by war, can love build bridges strong enough to last? Tom and Greta Harlow answered that question with their lives. In choosing compassion over fear, they proved that even in the ruins of war, love remains the most defiant act of all, the stubborn, transformative power of two people daring to see each other not as enemies, but simply as human.